Get on up.
Everybody right there.
Get into it.
Everybody right there.
Get involved.
Everybody just come on up. Come on up.
Hello and welcome to The Public Good. This is Andrea O'Sullivan from Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, which unites 268 community organizations working to build a better Buffalo. This is our first show at our brand new time slot, and we're delighted to be joining you from now on every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Today we're joined by Rob Galbraith from the Public Accountability Initiative and Sage Green from People United for Sustainable Housing to talk about National Grid's proposed energy rate increase, which could appear on all of your electricity bills, and what they are doing to oppose it. But first we'll speak with Duncan Kirkwood, a candidate for Erie County Legislator. Don't forget to follow PPG on Facebook and Twitter, and of course, you can always get great information on our website, ppgbuffalo.org. The Public Good is sponsored in part by Univera Healthcare, real people who really care. Video of this show is on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ppgbuffalo. You can also find videos from previous week's shows on our YouTube page. And just a few announcements before we start our interviews of some interesting events coming up. First, we're inviting you to celebrate PPG's 10th anniversary on October 5th at 6 p.m. at the Albright Knox Art Gallery, and we'll have a great night exploring the theme of beauty and democracy with performances by singer Drea Deneur, some amazing local poets, and more. On September 22nd, the 4-H Youth Community Action Network will host a community and police speak-out from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Delavan Grider Community Center. And this is a group of young people from a local high school who are asking you to come out and perform, bring some artwork, do a poem, story, or spoken word piece about your feelings on police and community police relations. And to get involved, you can email Sarah at sej57@cornell.edu by this Friday, September 15th, if you'd like to contribute to the performance. And finally, Open Buffalo is holding a Justice and Opportunity Essay Contest for high school students. If you had $2,500 to solve a problem that you see in your community, what would the problem be? And what would you do about it to create change? Essays about this can be submitted by email to info@openbuffalo.org or to Open Buffalo at 617 Main Street, Suite 350, Buffalo, New York, 14203. Again, send your essay entries to info@openbuffalo.org, and all entries are due by October 10th. So first, Duncan Kirkwood, we're going to turn to you and ask you to tell us what is your biggest priority as a candidate for Erie County Legislator?
Thank you so much for having me on, and I'm sorry again that I jumped in on you guys' time today, but like I said, I'm running for Erie County Legislature in District 2. It's the seat being vacated by Betty Jean Grant. She's given up her seat to run for mayor. So my biggest priorities are going to be, number one, to fix the Erie County Holding Center. Everybody kind of lays that at the sheriff's feet, and rightfully so. But the county legislature allocates the money to the holding center and the correction center, over $85 million. And I want to tie substantial policy changes to the budget, just like our state legislature does when they pass their bills every year with the budget. Also, I want to increase the diversity in the Erie County's government all across the board. So I want to increase the diversity in the full-time staff. There's over 4,000 people that work full-time for Erie County. Only about 380 of them are black. I want to increase the diversity in the nonprofit cultural organizations that Erie County supports. 69 of them. There's 69 cultural nonprofits that Erie County gives funding to. Only about a handful of them are black, and only about 1 or 2 are Hispanic. And I want to increase the diversity in the contracting and the purchasing departments that Erie County. So basically, whoever does business with Erie County. And again, it's not to anyone else's detriment, but everybody should be benefiting from the growth of the county. Everybody should have the opportunity to do business with the county in a real way. Because what happens when small businesses or minority businesses, when they do business with the county, it's able to sustain their business, and then they have to hire more folks to handle the business for that year, and they hire people from their community. So it really helps build the community when they can get those large type of contracts as minority, women-owned, or veteran-owned businesses. And those are going to be some of the main things. I have other things, making sure we have clean water, combating lead poisoning, and a host of other issues that directly affect us, making sure our seniors have access to services, our youth have programs. But, you asked me for the main one, so I kind of...
Thank you, Duncan. Yeah, let's just dig into a couple of those. PPG has certainly worked in the past, and many of our partners are concerned about conditions at the holding center. And we've seen investigations into that and recommendations made. So what do you propose kind of specifically to improve that?
So the first thing I'm going to do if I get elected is I'm going to bring together administrative staff from the holding center. I'm going to bring some administrative staff from other holding centers in other states that do the job well, people who have gone to the holding center, and other law enforcement experts and consultants to figure out what are some best practices, because it can't be rocket science that other states are able to do it well and treat their people with dignity and respect when they're holding them, and somehow magically we can't. Our suicide rate is 5 times the national average. And a lot of people who I personally know their families say their people did not commit suicide, or they got beat up on the elevator or just different issues. So I'd like to, one of the ideas I have is I want independent medical consultants to work with the holding center. So when inmates say, I need access to care or I have this issue, it's not the CO who's making the determination if they're telling the truth or not. I also want to have more cameras in the holding center and have an independent contracted agency to monitor those cameras, because people act differently when they're being videotaped. And then have that be transparent. So what actions are taken against officers that go above and beyond and use excessive force. But again, I'm not a law enforcement expert, so I want to bring together experts to find the best practices to implement in our holding center. Because again, I have family members who have been in the holding center. It's not supposed to be a hotel, but it should be humane where people are treated with decency and respect.
Absolutely. And just to zoom in on your comments on diversity, I think that's a striking statistic that the county has 4,000 employees and 380 are Black full-time employees. We've used research at PPG, social science research, that says when government bodies are more diverse, they become more transparent, more creative, and they have better governance overall. So how can we increase the diversity in the county?
So just for one example, we'll say social services. So I talked with some folks so I think that's one of the biggest problems, because if there's not a lot of diversity in social services, that means when people come to our homes, come to our communities on the east and west side, they don't look like us. They don't have shared experiences, which is why African Americans make up 13% of Erie County, but almost half the children taken out of the home are Black children, right? So I think that social services, and as I talk to the folks and I'm telling them this, they're saying to me, listen, we want more diversity. Help us recruit more, right? We need better trained social workers or caseworkers. But it's hard to retain them, because once we train them, the caseload is so overwhelming that they fizzle out, they burn out, and they go to a different profession. So they said, help us have more staff. Help us increase the staff so that we can meet all the needs of these folks and then retain our good qualified people. So, it's going to take a concentrated effort where someone's going to make it a priority. And again, I'm not trying to be a rebel rouser. I want to work with the different agencies and work with the different departments to meet the needs of the community.
And yes, as you said, to get especially frontline service staff more reflecting the communities that they serve in terms of diversity. And that's certainly a recommendation we hear at PPG from many of our partners, and one that we've made about the police force and other public servants as well. So Duncan, thank you so much for being with us.
Listen, thank you guys so much for having me. Again, I'm sorry for encroaching on your time here. I hope everybody goes vote. This is going to air at 7. There's still 2 hours left to vote. So if you haven't voted, go vote. I hope you would vote for me, but if not, just vote for somebody. Let your voice be heard. Thank you all so much. Call me anytime. I'd love to chat. Win, lose, whatever. I want to be a part of good things going on. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. So Rob and Sage, Rob Galbraith from the Public Accountability Initiative and Sage Green from PUSH. We want to zoom in now on the National Grid's proposed energy rate increase. So Rob, for people who haven't been following this issue, can you just tell us what's happened?
Sure. Well, in April 2017, National Grid, which is our local electricity monopoly, asked for a rate hike that, because they're a regulated monopoly, needs to be approved by the State Public Service Commission. They're asking for $330 million in new revenue for the company, which they say it needs to provide safe and reliable service, to ratepayers that rely on them.
And is it right that we know already electricity prices in New York State are already the 4th highest in the country?
Yeah, that that is right. And more than that, National Grid has recorded just gigantic profits over the past few years, and just throughout its sort of history as a company, especially as it's expanded in the Northeast. National Grid has generated, I want to say, $5.9 billion in profits in 2016 alone, and of that, $2 billion of that has come from their United States business, which, is largely located in New York State.
And Sage, with these increases, the proposed hike, can customers expect any improvements in their service?
From what we can tell, no. It's an increased charge across the board. It will make everyone's rates go up. But in terms of the reliability that they're going to offer, it's going to be about the same, and the product that they're going to be using is the exact same. So one of our big, for Push Buffalo, People United for Sustainable Housing, our idea of sustainability comes in two forms. One is the sustainable in terms of an ecological framework and the things that we do, so things that are going to be renewable and resilient for the long term, but also neighborhoods that are affordable. You can make as much wonderful, environmentally friendly things as you want, but if people can't access it or afford it, then that's not the same. So when it comes to utility cases, there are so many ways for utilities to make the product that they're using much more efficient, which will make it more affordable. It may mean that they will have to change the way that they structure their organization to return investment to their shareholders, but it will make it so that their customers are happier, healthier, better air quality, better and better affordability every month. We at Push Buffalo talk to people every day who have to make decisions between paying their rent, paying their utilities, feeding their kids, or doing just the regular civic things that make you a human being. So for us, the improvements that we see is really just that your rate is going to go up and not much is going to change.
Yeah, as to the improvements that people can see, National Grid does say in its literature, kind of promoting the rate hike, and it has its spokespeople both within the company and with other corporate lobbying groups. They talk about the provision of safe and reliable services, but it's really important to note that a part of this this rate hike is going to go to executive compensation, and paying all of National Grid's workers, but specifically a piece of this is going to go to paying its top executives, who are already extremely well compensated.
And then at the same time, as you've said, just ordinary people are already having trouble meeting these bills. And I have here info that says over each of the past 2 years, National Grid has terminated service to 66,000 households due to non-payment. And in June, this past June alone, 10,000 customers had their service shut off by the company. So again, it's just that tension between everyday affordability for people and the real driver behind this rate increase. So Sage, can you tell us more about how does this relate to people in Buffalo who are already working for sustainable energy? What's the bigger picture?
Mm-hmm. So I think that last point you made is a really important one. 66,000 shutoffs each year for the past 2 years. If that was any other company whose product was so unaffordable that they had to turn that many people off, all the shareholders would say, "What are you doing? There's a problem here. You need to make this more affordable." Because of the way that this is structured, the only solutions that they have for it is to ask for more money from the community who are paying monthly to help pay for the bills of the people who couldn't afford it that time. So in my language, I'm 25, so that sounds like a big GoFundMe. And if they want to just open one of those, that's cool. I will show them how to set it up. But if they want to actually make solutions that will make the entire infrastructure for energy more affordable, more efficient, and more resilient in the long term, the solutions that we see are much more based in transitioning to renewables. There is one renewable project in the city right now that National Grid has been working on, and that's the Fruit Belt REV demo. REV is a New York State program right now re-envisioning the energy future for New York State. But that demo project has seen very little savings for the Fruit Belt community and was not done transparently and is completely owned by the utility, meaning they are making a ton of money off of it right now. In reality, what Push Buffalo would want to see is, in the same way that our national fuel bills will fund weatherization programs to help you reduce how much gas you're actually using in your home, we want revolving loan funds that help you go solar. Solar is particularly affordable in New York across the country, but it's still something that LMI, low and moderate income communities, are left out of, and yet low and moderate incomes pay the most for energy across the board, and especially electricity. So in terms of the sustainability work that we're doing, we want pathways to ownership for renewables, even if that means having conversations about decentralization of the grid and things like that. They're really important conversations that need to be had ASAP. We want to see the mechanisms that they're using to show how much energy people are being charged for to be the part that's charged. So right now you get charged for how much energy you use, but you also get charged a service charge. In New York State, or in our area specifically, National Grid charged $17 a month just to be connected. That is incredibly high. For places like Rhode Island and Massachusetts, where National Grid also operates, they pay $5 or $6 a month just to be part of the grid. And so if you want to incentivize savings, if you want to incentivize people being more eco-friendly, I mean, people will say, oh, just turn your lights off. Oh, these people, they don't know how to use their homes. So then that's the only reason they're paying so much. No, they're flatlining $17 a month no matter what. And that would make a huge difference. So if they want to come and look for savings from us, I want them to be coming from places that we can actually have control over.
So even as ordinary consumers might say, let's turn the lights off, let's keep electric heaters off, take these everyday steps we hear about to reduce consumption, that has no effect on your charge.
It will have a minimal effect. Like, I mean, you can do a certain number of things to be energy efficient. I was an energy auditor for the weatherization programs before I worked at Push Buffalo, and you can weatherize a home and reduce someone's gas bill very easily. You can replace light bulbs and replace refrigerators, and it will make a small difference on your electric bill. So it's more talking about sustainability investments rather than energy efficiency. So if I put solar on someone's house and they got some incentives, a tax credit from the state, as well as a loan in the same way that they get weatherization loans, and then a little bit out of pocket, you could cover someone's entire bill for the whole year, and they would be paying something like just the service charge, and then also the property values in their neighborhood and for their home go up, and it's like a regenerative solution. That is the only way to reduce someone's electric bill at this point. You can put in as many efficient things. You can unplug your kids' cell phones when they're not looking, but you're not going to make that big of a difference in your bills until the utility works with us on real solutions.
And Rob, typically with processes like this, there's some space for community input or public comment. So can you tell us what's happened with this proposed rate hike?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's avenues for public comment. Folks can still submit comments on the proposed rate hike to the Public Service Commission directly. Back at the beginning of August, the PSC held a public hearing in Buffalo where folks were able to give testimony in person to this. That being said, though the window is starting to close, the Public Service Commission is entering into settlement negotiations with parties to the rate case a week from today, actually, on September 19th. So it is important that people do make their voices heard on this because that window is closing and the decision will eventually be made.
And anyone who's interested in getting involved, I mean, Push Buffalo is working. We have comment cards. We have regular meetings on September 26th. Our Energy Democracy Committee is going to be meeting to talk more about this topic as well as others, where we're trying to model these solutions in our own communities. So anyone who's interested in learning more, getting involved, signing a card, getting your name onto this rate case, Google Push Buffalo, give us a call. We're on Facebook, Twitter, all the things. And we would love to hear from you. A lot of people tend to think that rate cases are just a handful of petty people complaining about something, when in reality this is a collective utility that we all have a stake in. So our input is actually necessary. Come talk to me.
And I know that National Grid has claimed part of this new revenue will be infrastructure, but will also be creating new jobs. So how do you and your organizations respond to those claims of, yes, we're increasing everybody's monthly bill, but the benefit to the community will actually be positive because you'll be netting some new jobs?
I mean, it may be the case that that the new people are hired for jobs and possibly for good jobs at National Grid. But I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the people who are going to be benefiting the most are, the actual executives at National Grid. The Dean Seavers, the president of National Grid United States, made $4 million last year. He is going to see a direct benefit from this. National Grid's shareholders, who were paid $1.9 billion in dividends last year. I mean, those folks are really going to see, the bigger kind of material benefit from increasing the bills of, everybody who doesn't have a choice but to give their money to National Grid if they want to have electricity.
And I mean, for Push Buffalo's perspective on this, I think it's straight up coded language in the way that they're talking about it, where they say they're going to hire highly skilled labor in the electric field, which narrows that down to this small number of people who are either union or have union experience in the electric union, which is a 5-year program that's incredibly exclusive and is not something that is accessible to the communities in which this matters most. And so if you're going to talk about jobs, and it's not that high of a number for the amount of money they're asking, I want them to also talk about training. I want them to talk about entry-level jobs, apprentices, all of the things that need to happen in order to make these real community jobs and not just more of the same.
So real kind of workforce development, getting new people into the energy sector, which we're repeatedly told is full of opportunities. Mm-hmm. I'm also curious, Rob, right at the start, I think you referred to National Grid as our energy monopoly, one of the energy monopolies that we have. Right. In Western New York. And so, yes, I mean, everyone has this electricity. Is there a way to opt out? Sage has mentioned solar power, but if you don't want to be part of the energy monopoly, what options do people have?
Move to Akron, where they have a municipal-owned electric, or lobby your city to become a municipal-owned electric utility. There are, there's a whole body of law, public service law, that governs how utilities work. We think of them as just any other company that you get a bill from, it's Netflix, it's whatever, but no, it's actually something, it is the only option that you have in this area. They're entered into a contract with us as a society to be the only monopoly over a certain area as long as they meet certain things. And that structure is one that doesn't leave a lot of other options unless we make them ourselves. And so that's a lot of the work the Push is doing right now, is to get down in the dirt around what are those other options and how do we build them.
And yeah, as both of your organizations look at those options or map the power of different utility companies, I think it would be interesting to kind of reflect on how do we get to this system? What is the typical system of utility companies? How do they work? How do they make such huge profits that you've mentioned?
One way is, like you mentioned, by being a monopoly. National Grid is a regulated monopoly here in Buffalo, and so we don't have a choice but to buy our electricity from them. As like a concession to their monopoly status, they're allowed a certain return on their equity, which is basically the amount of profit they're allowed to derive. Right now, that's set at 9%. Although National Grid has been found in several audits to have been overcharging people. Very recently, they overcharged New York City gas customers by $69 million in 2010 and 2011. Another audit found that they were overcharging upstate electric customers by $8.5 million. That's by having an actual monopoly that is granted and enforced by the government is really how they kind of record some of these eye-popping profits and payouts of these really high salaries.
And there's sort of a specific formula, if we have time, that I can be really quick about in terms of how an investor-owned utility works. There's a nuance to this in lots of different ways, but this is how they're governed to work, is that you start with something called a rate base, which is everything that the utility owns. So that's all the infrastructure. That's the lines, that's the substations, that's the meters, that's the equipment that they use to fix those things. It's like if you're a homeowner, it's your home. It's everything you own in your home and the equity that you have in that. You can multiply that by, a utility multiplies that by the rate of return, that Rob had mentioned earlier, which is at 9% right now. So say you're capital, your rate base gets you $100. You multiply that by 9%, you have $109, and you can give those $9 to your shareholders. So that's what your shareholders are really interested in, which is why they always want that rate to go up. So that only covers your infrastructure. That's the beginning of that equation. Everything else after that is considered your operating expenses. So, which the utility just gets to add to their budget line by asking the PSC, the Public Service Commission, for it, which then we fund in our bills every month. So operating expenses includes who they're paying and how they're paying them. It includes all of the income assistance programs. So it feels really cool when we're like, oh, they're going to give us more money to help more people who don't have as much money stay afloat and stay in these programs. When in reality, that's us paying that money to them so that they can give it back to us. They can give it to themselves and then give it back to us. And then, so you take the required rate of return, say that's $109. You add that $100 that you're going to spend in operating expenses, and you get your full budget. So that runs like no other organization. That's not how homeowners think. That's not how small businesses think. That's not how anything makes products or community-based solutions that really help people. So there are versions of this that say, what if it's not owned by investors in England, investors who aren't from our community? Rob, National Grid is owned. Do you know where they're based?
Yeah, they're
based in England
London.
now.
Yeah,
So they're based in London. None of that money is coming back to us. None of that is going into our community. So what if it's co-op owned? What if it's community owned? That's what municipalities who have gone and made their own utilities have done, so that they can shift that. So those decisions are not based on this weird algorithm of how to figure out how much equity you have and how much you can give to your shareholders, and instead is based on what is staying in our communities and what's efficient.
Yeah, I know that Sage and I have both thrown kind of a lot of numbers out there, but I think like a really important takeaway and a really simple way to think about it is that National Grid could cover this $330 million it's asking us to pay if it only invested 7% of its 2016 profits back into the business. It could also pay for that just by reducing its dividend payout by 22%, which is paying out $1.57 billion instead of $1.9 billion. The fact of the matter is they have more than enough money to pay for these improvements that they say that they are now asking us to pay for.
So Rob from Public Accountability Initiative and Sage from Push Buffalo, thanks for diving into this complex issue. I think we've heard ways that we could be investing in local energy in the community and also just keeping people's bills a bit more reasonable. So get your comments into the Public Service Commission and get in touch with Push to get involved. I'm Andrea O'Sullivan with Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG. Join us next week on The Public Good on Tuesday, September 19th at 7 p.m. when we talk with Jill Robbins-Jabin and Deanna Workman from Buffalo's YWCA. That's The Public Good, Tuesday at 7 p.m. on Power 96 FM and Mix 1080.
Everybody over there,
Get on up.
everybody right there,
Get into it.
everybody right there,
Get involved.
everybody just